You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 99 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and alongside me, as he always has been, my good brother, my good friend, and the gentleman that runs our Twitter page. That's right, it's my good brother, Liam. Liam, final episode, felt like we would never get here, not in a bad way, but final episode of our Elseworlds Superman month this week, and we have a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, thank God we're running out of Elseworlds Superman. But but yes, we're ending on a relatively high note. We're returning to the world of the Batman. We reviewed one episode of this series previously in last year's Elseworlds month, and here we are again to review this version of Batman meeting this universe's version of Superman for the first time.
There we go. And if I recall, we've only done one episode of this, as you mentioned, in our Batman Elseworlds month, which you can hear in the archives at DCAUreview.com. I believe it was somewhere in the 40s, probably 49, something like that.
40s, yes.
40. I think it may have been right before our 50th episode. So you can check that in the archives at DCAUreview.com. But Liam, so this week that week, when we reviewed this the first time, it was the very first episode of The Batman, which featured the Joker. It featured a new Batman theme. Here we're jumping all the way to the final season of The Batman, which is season 5 at this point. Things have changed, not just the opening theme song. No, gone is the edges from U2's rendition of The Batman, and replaced with a bit more of a campy style intro, which we can talk about certainly in music, but there's been a lot of changes to the Bat team as a whole, as we learned in Batman's world in this 5th season.
Yeah, we'll kind of have a little bit to talk about in every category about the changes, but starting as we do with plot, obviously when we first watched the first episode of the show, it's very much a young Batman show, and he's very early on in his crime-fighting career, and then a few seasons later, we've got multiple sidekicks and an entire Justice League in the wings waiting. So it's a lot has certainly changed as we rejoin this version of Gotham City.
Certainly. All right. Now, before we jump into our 4 main categories, let us go with the IMDb synopsis for this week's episode of The Batman.
Of course. I actually have 2, of course, since it's a 2-parter that we're reviewing. And these are the synopses for The Batman Superman story, parts 1 and 2, which were written by Alan Burnett and Steve Kudin, directed by Vincent Hueck and Christopher Berkeley, with music by Thomas Chase. And these synopses read as such. Lex Luthor teams with the rogues of Gotham City in a scheme to place Metropolis's Man of Steel under his control. And the synopsis for part 2. Batman and Robin must free Superman from Lex Luthor's control via Poison Ivy's hypnotic spores.
All right, there we go. Those are pretty good synopses written by the individuals that edit IMDb, I guess. So now we did not mention these episodes first debuted back on September the 22nd, 2007 for part 1, and September 29th, 2007 for part 2, part of the Kids WB Saturday morning program lineup. And Liam, these episodes, as you said, take place in the final season of The Batman, and it's, correct me if I'm not wrong, these are the first episodes of the season, sort of after this sort of, and we'll eventually get to reviewing it at some time, but there's been sort of this seismic shift in Batman's world. He's not just facing common criminals anymore. He realizes his world is kind of opened up, and is having to adapt to aliens and other things that he hasn't had to deal with before.
Yeah, certainly. There's a big shift at the end of the 4th season, as you mentioned. Perhaps we'll get to review that somewhere down the line. But where we're introduced to the character of the Martian Manhunter. We're introduced to an alien invasion, and Batman, Robin, and Batgirl are sort of faced down with having to just, again, as you say, fight foes they never dreamed of having to fight. And so as we begin the season 5 premiere, Batman sort of accepted that and has agreed to join this newly formed Justice League. And it's actually interesting as we get into our plot scores here, Cal. One of the things I think is really interesting about this two-part episode is we've almost kind of reversed what I feel are the normal roles of Superman and Batman when it comes to like being team players. Very much we have Batman being the guy who's sort of championing working together and sort of creating this larger network of heroes, and we kind of have Superman being the one that's resistant to that.
Yeah, I too noticed that, and it was a nice change of pace. And obviously, these stories, as we've already reviewed, one of them, a Batman Superman sort of, albeit a lighthearted take on it, but nowadays that Batman Superman story has the rivalry and the sort of lack of trust between the two of them, but underlying friendship that lies between them. This sort of allies, I guess, as it were. So that story's been told a lot. So to have their roles sort of reversed here, and you have Alan Burnett, who is certainly a Batman animated series stalwart and someone that's been writing Batman for quite a long time, but for him and his co-writers to make that decision to, hey, this time we're going to make Superman the loner and sort of the guy that doesn't trust anybody but himself. Yeah, it was a different take on it, and I appreciated having a different type of interpretation for the Man of Steel.
Yeah, and they do that without making him like an edgy, like it still very much feels like Superman. Like the episode opens with him bringing like a large check that Metropolis is donating to the relief fund for Gotham City to help rebuild after this giant alien invasion. And so we see Superman kind of, he's still very much that, the smiling, friendly face when we meet him, but he really kind of has this idea of, I think things will be better if I just work on my own and I just worry about my own stuff, and you and the rest of these heroes can kind of go off over there. So it definitely gave it a different vibe. And then from there it's just kind of a fun bit. We kind of open with this big action scene of Batman, Robin, and Superman fighting Metallo, and from there we move on to Superman after, as fate would have it, possibly for the first time ever, I'd have to check, Lois Lane was kidnapped. And this time by the Gotham Rogues Gallery, we get to see the Black Mask, Bane, Clayface, and Mr. Freeze. And we get to see them face down Superman with some help of some special weapons. And then, in fact, we get to see Lex Luthor using sort of cribbing on the Batman Hush story, where Poison Ivy was able to take control of Superman using like kryptonite-laced pheromones, so they kind of take from that, but this time it's Lex Luthor being the one pulling the strings. And and then we get, for the second time this month, we're going to talk about a Batman-Superman fight, but I guess we can talk more about that in visuals, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it is a significant part of the plot. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, there's this opening battle between Superman and Metallo, and Batman takes possession of this kryptonite heart of Metallo, and supposedly gives it to Superman, and Superman hurls it into the sun. But we learn later on that Batman, because no matter what world Batman it is, no matter what else world it is, Batman still doesn't fully trust the Man of Steel. So he ends up keeping the rock himself, tricking Superman into throwing an empty container into the sun and holding on to this kryptonite heart. And then ends up using it in an attempt to defeat the Man of Steel. So the battle ensues, and I gotta say, I think, to me, the battle started out very interesting. Batman sort of wears this mecha suit, and mech suits are always really cool visually to look at. We'll talk about that in animation visuals for sure. But Batman in a giant suit of armor fighting Superman is never not going to be interesting to me, at least. However, it sort of ends very anticlimactically with Batman luring Superman, and I guess to appreciate Batman always being the guy that has to outsmart, has to use his brain, because his brawn isn't going to match Superman, because obviously Superman's powers are tenfold that of his, so he has to use his brain. So he lures him into this chemical plant that has pheromone canceling powers, I guess, for whatever.
It's whatever weed killer, basically. He makes him inhale weed killer, and that, I guess, kills the pheromones.
It kills the plants and the plant spores, which reverts Superman back to or frees him from mind control and reverts him back to his normal self. But that part seemed to be a little anticlimactic to me. There was this big battle that was happening, and he just kind of walks into a chemical plant, and Batman turns a few wheels, and suddenly Superman's back to himself. So and then next thing we know, Lex Luthor's in jail. But so I would say overall I did appreciate some of the plot points that we had already discussed, as far as Superman and Batman exchanging roles. I think that the bit at the end where Batman invites Superman to the Watchtower, and they have a conversation about Batman is again making another appeal to him to join the Justice League, or the budding Justice League, and there's a couple of witty lines regarding Batman saying Superman calls it the Justice Team, and Batman says it's the Justice League. He told the Martian that it sounded like a sports team, which I thought was a good line. But yeah, I think that was a good scene. Overall, it did feel very anticlimactic to me. I did appreciate the battle between Superman and the Batman rogues. That's something you don't always get to see, because Batman's rogues tend to be more easily defeated than a Superman rogue, just because it has to be that way. So seeing Superman versus Bane, or Superman versus Clayface, or even Superman versus Black Mask and Mr. Freeze is always going to be entertaining. So I went with a score of 7 out of 10 for plot.
Yes, I went with an identical score of 7 out of 10. We should mention, so once the fight is over, and they're all sort of, Batman, Superman, and Robin are all kind of going after Luthor, the big climax of the episode is that Lex has devised these robots that can hack into military systems via Wi-Fi, I guess.
Oof.
And he's going to take over the entire world in like a matter of minutes. And then he puts himself inside this giant robot.
Right, which is fairly easily dismantled.
I would say as soon as Superman is done dealing with the smaller robots, he just comes and takes Lex's giant robot apart.
Yeah.
So I think, like I said, I think a better climax to part 2. Like I said, I think the build in part 1 is very good. The ending of part 1 with Superman being, his mind being taken over by Lex is really well done. But yeah, the payoff to it all, when it's like, all right, our heroes are united and they're going to stop the bad guy, and his plan is robots. It leaves a little to be desired, at least from a narrative standpoint.
I concur. All right, Liam, let's move on to our second category of the day, which is going to be animation and visuals. We touched on it briefly about the Bat mech suits, but what else in this episode stood out to you visually, and what did you like? What did you not like?
So one thing we can mention that the Batman design himself, and really all of the characters, were like moderately redesigned at the start of the 4th season. So Batman has a very like triangular chin in the first couple seasons, and now he's sort of, I think maybe it was to age him up a little bit, because now he has 2 young teenage sidekicks with him, so now he has to be a little bit older, a little bit more imposing. So they kind of beefed Batman up a little bit in the 4th season. So that's kind of striking, being that the most recent episode of the show that I had gone back and watched was the pilot. to go all the way into this 5th season, as we talked about. So there's immediately just a little bit of a redesign just in Batman himself. Other than that, I really liked the Superman design. He longtime listeners will know, Cal, this is our 99th episode. Big fan of capes, especially when they move. And
yes.
I like that. Batman's cape on the show, it's always like long and sweeping, and when he's not doing anything, it's like it's all curled around him, and then he flings it open, and it's just a giant long cape. Superman has a really big cape that like drapes over his shoulders. I thought that made for just a little bit of a different design than what we're used to with Superman. So again, it feels very much authentically Superman, what you would imagine a Superman would look like in this world. But that little extra twist to it I thought was nice. And then like we've talked about, I think that the fight between Batman and Superman, certainly the first part, is pretty interesting. I liked that Batman he's very much on the defensive the whole time. He doesn't really have the thought in his head that like, I'm gonna, as you pointed out when we were talking about it in plot, he's not really thinking like, I'm gonna knock him out, or with my robot, or Robin's gonna be able to stop him with some rockets. Like he's always kind of on the defensive the whole fight, and is kind of just trying to buy himself enough time. And I thought that was reflected pretty well in the way the fight is sort of laid out. Is Batman's kind of constantly trying to get space between him and Superman as he's trying to lure him towards this place. So sure. I thought that was well done. And then again, I like seeing the rest of the Rogues Gallery show up. This Bane design is obviously very different than any Bane design that's been around in animation or in comic books before it. So he's much more similar to like a Hulk villain. You know how Hulk is always fighting guys who look like the Hulk but are like a slightly different color.
Yep,
that's very much what this Bane feels like. The only thing that kind of let me down, I liked Mercy's design. I liked she's a lot more visually interesting, and she has these like twin pistols where she kind of holds off Batman and Robin on her own for a while they're trying to get to Lex. So like I thought that was a pretty interesting scene. There's actually one great shot as Batman and Robin are kind of standing on this walkway as Lex and his giant robot is taking off. And you sort of see the rocket exhaust, and you just see the silhouettes of Batman and Robin, and they fire their grappling hooks and swing away so they aren't incinerated by it. So I thought there were some pretty striking visuals in this episode.
Yeah, there are. There's a lot of Batarang play in this episode as well. A lot of Batarangs being thrown, a lot of Batarangs being used as weapons. I think so. I think we talked about it when we reviewed the pilot episode of this, that I wasn't as much of a fan of the animation style. Of course, I'm certainly part and partial to the Bruce Timm designs, and this is far and away very, very different than that. Guys are a lot lankier, taller, skinnier, a lot less barrel chested. But I really liked most of the visuals in this. I'll talk about what I didn't like first, and then the only thing that I really don't care for, and is interesting because we just talked about him on our bonus episode number 4, and that is the Robin design. To me, whenever Robin is in any of the scenes, he looks like a bobblehead. His head, they drew his head so large on his teeny tiny body. And all I can think about is the action figures that came out for this show also. Yeah. And it was very, very similar to that. The figure itself looked like a bobblehead. His head is just twice the size of his body. And if all of the characters were like that, then I would be okay with it. But when he's juxtaposed to Batman has a normal sized head and is an adult, but because Robin is a child, I guess they decided that he had to have this big giant head. I don't know. I'm not a fan of the Robin design itself, and he played a large role in this episode, which is fine, but it's very distracting every time it comes on the screen. With that said, I definitely appreciated some of the villain designs. Certainly the way that Clayface moves in this.
Yeah.
He's not just the guy that disguises himself as other people. He was very he had like a very spider-like appearance when he turns from Clark. He poses as Clark Kent to kidnap Lois Lane, and then he climbs down the building with a very spider-like creature, and then he actually poses, I think, as like a camera or a computer screen or something in another scene. It's very, very different than what we've been used to as far as Clayface is concerned. Moved very, very interestingly also. You already mentioned Bane's design. Certainly our first opportunity to talk about the different Mr. Freeze design, which he's just these glowing red eyes and this sort of giant icicle type helmet. Very, very, very interesting looking. Black Mask, who is of course never used in Batman the Animated Series, definitely would fit in that, in my opinion, or would have fit in that very well. But definitely, we talked about him in episode 50 when we reviewed Batman Under the Red Hood. That's a great design. And then I guess the pièce de résistance would be the Batman mech suit, which. We have Lucius Fox early in the episode, who is it's the first time we've talked about him on these. He was introduced in that very similar Batman Begins Nolan trilogy role of being Batman's tech guy. So he created this mech suit, and he created a jetpack for Robin as well, and very, very, very cool functional looking things for Batman to use to fight Superman. So with the strong visuals, despite my dislike of the Robin design, I gave animation visuals a very strong 9 out of 10.
I gave it the exact same score. I think maybe I could have gone perfect if the robots were a bit more interesting looking, but they're just big white robots. Like they're not.
Yeah, they're not very interesting.
They kind of look like the big white thing from the Big Hero 6 movie. maybe mixed with like the Golem from Batman Beyond or something. But
that's good.
But it just didn't do much for me, and because that is, as we already mentioned, is the climax of the episode. As much fun as it is to watch Superman and Batman fight giant robots, I'd like the robots to be a bit more visually interesting. But yeah,
I prefer the way the robots look in World's Finest.
Agreed. I like the spider bots.
For sure. All right, Liam, let's move on to music here. What did you think about the music? For me, I think the one thing that stood out about this interpretation of the Man of Steel that I had critiqued previous iterations of the Man of Steel is there's an actual Superman theme, and it seems to be inspired perhaps by the Superman theme.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of this, and we didn't really mention this in visuals, but we do get some brief glimpses of Clark Kent as well, and it's very clear that this was that version of Clark Kent, and the music that we heard was very much inspired by the Christopher Reeve films, and by the theme being the main John Williams Superman theme that everyone knows, as you said, the Superman theme. And right. I like that. It's funny because I think it's nearly 50 episodes ago, but when we reviewed The Batman, my memory of the music in that episode is that a lot of it is just refrains. Like someone will say something kind of dramatic, and then we'll get like a note or two of music, or like a sort of an echoey guitar sound or something, and then we get little transitional music as we transition scenes or whatever. But this one felt like it had a little bit more of an actual flow to it, and definitely felt like a little bit more of a stronger theme. And I think that Superman theme certainly helped out, because you get it played very heroically when he first enters the scene, and then later on when taken over by Lex, it's played again, but it's played in like this really eerie kind of sinister minor key, and that gives you, kind of builds up that sense of dread as he's chasing after Batman. And I think that's good, and I think there's some good music towards the end as they're fighting the Lex bots. But so I actually gave music. I gave it a 6 out of 10. So I didn't think anything was great, but I thought it was definitely an improvement over the previous episodes of the Batman we watched.
I gave it just a tick higher. I really enjoyed the Superman theme. I think I probably would have given it an even higher score, but I did think that the main theme of the Batman was a downgrade. It's very much sounds like an homage to Batman 66 with a little bit of electric guitar added into it. It's very like 60s surfer music or something like that.
There's even even if you watch the opening title sequence, there's like they even kind of do the Adam West Burt Ward opening theme thing where they pan, like all the villains are kind of standing in a row and it kind of pans from one side to the other, and they kind of it's definitely felt inspired by that. So I hear you on that.
Yeah, so I did enjoy that Superman theme. I do think the fact that they kept their sort of unique musical identity with those, guitar interludes that play when the tension rises or scene switches. I appreciate that they set that as their own identity. But music 7 out of 10. All right, Liam, let's move on to our final category of the day, blazing right through this thing, and we're going to talk about voice actors. And it was a pleasant surprise. Well, not a surprise because I knew, but people might have a pleasant surprise when they hear some of the voice actors from this week's episode if they aren't familiar with it. So let's go through our roster of voice actors for this week.
Yeah, we have a pretty big cast, and as you mentioned, a lot of familiar faces. So many that this was borderline disqualified from being Elseworlds because of the voice talent. I feel like, but no, it's different enough that I think it still qualifies. But yeah, just some of the ancillary players we had. We had Gwendolyn Yo as Mercy. She doesn't have a big role to play here. Like I said, she's more of a visual, interesting thing. But Gwendolyn Yo, a very veteran television actress, playing her. And then we have James Remar as Black Mask, who DCAU fans will probably know best as the Shadow Thief in Justice League Unlimited, and also the real Hawkman, Carter Hall. That's some foreshadowing. And I really like his Black Mask. He got this weird rasp to it, and they put kind of a little bit of an effect of some sort on it. And he's a real sinister guy. I like his version of Black Mask. And then we have Clancy Brown as Lex Luthor. Yes, he may have played this role once or twice before. And he is, in fact, he's playing him he's definitely a little more cartoony and over the top than the Superman the Animated Series Lex Luthor. But it's still,
for sure,
he could pretty much do this role in his sleep at this point.
For sure. Yeah, he gets some time to shine. Obviously, his appearance doesn't come till probably late in the second act of the first episode, but he's definitely a huge part of that, of the rest of that episode and the beginning and end of part 2. But yeah, it's comforting to hear, and it's a little weird because the visuals are different, but you get used to it and you get that comforting feeling of, yes, it's Lex. It is Lex. And he is playing him. He's playing him, yeah, like you said, a little more cartoony, a little bit more, he's straight up evil in this. Well, not straight. He isn't straight up evil till the end of the episode, but he's a more maniacal, I guess, this version of Luthor.
Definitely. And we have Dana Delaney as Lois Lane, who you may have heard of. Again, the Lois Lane.
Right.
And she doesn't have a big role to play, like we said. She's at the beginning of the first episode of first part of part 1, and then she gets kidnapped. That's kind of her contribution to the story. But it's still good to hear Dana Delaney as Lois again.
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same thing with Lex. You get a familiar voice. You have somebody that you feel comfortable with. You're like, oh, that's Lois Lane. It's supposed to be Lois Lane. It doesn't look like Lois Lane, but it sounds like Lois Lane.
Absolutely. And then we have our main cast here. We have Evan Sabara as Robin, who, despite your qualms about his visuals, I like Robin in this show. Obviously, he was one of our 5 favorite animated Robins, mostly because I made the case for him. But I like him as Robin.
I think that nothing against the voice actor. I think the voice actor plays, as far as a child actor is considered, for somebody that was required to play this role, he does a great job. He's not annoying. He doesn't. It's very reminiscent of Matt Valencia's Tim Drake in Batman and the new Batman Adventures. He's younger, but it's not over the top. Like, I want to pull my ears off because it's so terrible. He's a good actor. Like, his performance did nothing. It's the visual that I can't stand with the character.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, because for a large part of these 2-part episodes, he's there to kind of add a little bit of levity. There's a lot of quips, a lot of jokes, a lot of kind of smart remarks here and there, and that can get old, as we found reviewing other versions of Robin, including the main DCAU Robin, Lauren Lester's Dick Grayson, where sometimes when you just have Robin there to do quips, it can get real old real fast. And
for sure,
I thought that despite that was his main function in this episode, he still did a pretty good job. And yeah, we have Rino Romano as the Batman. We've talked about him once before, of course. You probably know him. Even if you don't think you know him, you probably do, because he does voiceovers for a bunch of different TV shows and like television networks. So you've probably heard his voice 100 times. And was also the voice of Spider-Man in the PlayStation 1 Spider-Man games that we played for countless hours. So he's always got a special place in my heart for that.
Our lives. Just days of our lives spent playing that game.
Yep, just finish it. You start it over again.
Yep.
In a new alternate costume. But yeah, I like him as Batman. Like we said, he's sort of aged up a little bit from when we first saw him. So maybe his voice is a little deeper. He's a little more mature than he was in the first episode when we saw him. But I think he's still a good fit for the Batman of this world. Yeah,
I concur. His performance. If we're gonna have another Batman, I mean, it's very, very hard. Just like when we talk about our Jokers, or doing a different Joker voice, but he fills this role, and I think we talked about it even when we reviewed the pilot episode, that for a younger Batman, which even if each season has been a year and this is year 5 of Batman, he's still a young Batman by any means. So he plays that role very well.
Agreed. And then we have the man himself. Superman, played by one George Newbern, who, once again, the voice of the DCAU, one of the DCAU Supermans, the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited version of Superman. Once again, getting to play a slightly different version, as we mentioned, because this version's kind of a little bit more standoffish with Batman, and doesn't really want to be part of a team, and because he's playing a bit more of a Christopher Reeve Clark Kent, he gets to flex his muscles there a little bit. But again, it's just not to repeat ourselves again, but always nice to hear George Newbern voicing Superman.
Yeah, and the fact that, like you said, he got to do a nuanced version of it, wasn't just a straight up, and having that. He doesn't get to play Clark except for maybe once or so in the DCAU. So having this opportunity to see what a George Newbern Clark would have been like is pretty cool. And on top of it, to have that homage to that sort of klutzy, goofy Clark Kent that was made, of course, most famous by the late great Christopher Reeve, is always a nice homage.
Agreed. So I guess we can go ahead and get into our scores here. I gave voice acting a very strong 8 out of 10.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't find any flaws with this. And because we had so many returning guests and familiar voices, I had to give this a perfect 10 out of 10.
Very nice.
Yeah. All right, Liam. So I guess that will bring us to our final scores today. Totaling everything up here, I have a very strong 33 out of 40.
Yeah,
What about
you? I'm a tick lower there, but not by too much. I'm a 30 out of 40, and I guess we can get into the rewatchability from here. Yeah, I think this is a fun 2-part episode to watch, especially if you're in the mood for just Batman and Superman stories, whether they be live action or animated. There's a lot of fun ones to be found, but I think this can go right in that column with maybe not quite on the same level as like a World's Finest, but certainly it belongs with maybe, those like the Public Enemies animated film or something like that. Anytime we get to see Batman and Superman as a duo, I think is a lot of fun. And I think this is worth a rewatch, even with the kind of lackluster ending to part 2.
Yeah, I concur. I think there's too much good stuff here between the voice acting, the visuals, the interesting plot points of Superman versus the Batman Rogues Gallery. I think there's a lot to be had and enjoyed here, and especially if this version of Batman and Superman are not familiar to you, this is a great way to kind of be introduced, especially to that final season of the Batman, which was pretty much all guest stars and sort of Justice Leaguers coming for Batman to meet and interact with. It's really a fun season, and this was a good way to introduce the Man of Tomorrow to this world of the Batman. So I'd give it a thumb up to go ahead and watch it.
Agreed.
All right, Liam. Well, that will wrap things up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening. Don't forget, as we've mentioned a couple times this week, we dropped a bonus episode this week in honor of Robin the Boy Wonder's 80th anniversary. You can check that out if you have not done so already on your favorite podcast app, also streaming at DCAUreview.com. We'd love to get your feedback on that. Hear what your favorite versions of Robin the Boy Wonder are in animation. Tweet Liam at DCAU Review. And we would be remiss without mentioning this, but as we mentioned, this being our 99th episode, meaning next week's episode, as we look to the next episode on the horizon, Liam, I believe you've already teased it on social media, but let's make the official announcement here. What are we doing for our landmark 100th episode?
Yeah, it's as much fun as this Elseworlds Superman month. These 5 different versions of Superman have been to review. We're going back home to the main DCAU continuity, and it's the 100th episode. We knew we had to do something really big, and so we're reviewing Superman's pal. I mean, no, just kidding.
Critters.
Yeah,
Terry's friend dates a robot.
It's a quadruple feature, and we're just gonna review. We're gonna review all of those. No, just kidding. We're gonna review one of truly the greatest stories, I think, in DCAU history. Or maybe it won't hold up. We don't know. We haven't reviewed it yet, of course. But in my memory banks, it holds up as one of the greatest, and I think it's very fitting for our 100th episode. We will be watching the 3-part epic Starcross, the series finale of the original Justice League cartoon.
All right. It's going to be a blast. We cannot wait to review that episode, hear your thoughts on that. Plus, we have some exciting stuff coming in the weeks after that, so that we're excited about also. So stay tuned. You are not going to want to miss it. And if you don't want to miss it, do us a favor. Subscribe to our podcast, whatever podcast app you listen to. We're on all the popular ones, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And do us a favor. If you like us, if you listen to us every single week, do us a favor. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us out immensely. We want to get this podcast out there and certainly get as many ears as possible. We thank you for tuning in at each and every of our 99 episodes thus far, and can't wait to see what the future brings us. Liam, anything else to add?
No, not much. Definitely tweet us at DCAU Review. Follow us on Instagram at DCAU Review. You can keep up with us for whatever we're doing from week to week, as well as any other DCAU or just DC Comics related news that's out there that we want to talk about. And we definitely want to hear from you. And let's get excited. 100 episodes. How about that, pal?
Man, I can't believe we made it. Unbelievable. All right. Well, until then, I am Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.